Hello and welcome to the FinTech Finance Virtual Arena. I'm your host, Doug McKenzie, and on today's session, we're going to be looking at ISO 20022, but more importantly, looking at the low-code, no-code approach for adoption of the international standard. Joining me today, I have three guests who are right at the heart of looking not only at its implementation, but also the international standard and when it comes to payments. So I'm going to go and ask my esteemed guests today to introduce themselves, and we're going to kick off with Chris Stairs from Valentin Technologies. Chris, how are you doing here today?
I'm doing fine, thanks, Doug. I hope you're well as well.
Yeah, really good, actually, really good. Chris, thank you again for joining. But for our audience who might not be aware, could you tell us a bit more about your role at Valentin Technologies and Valentin Technologies itself?
Good afternoon, everybody. So as Doug says, Chris Stairs here. I've been with Valentin Technologies for about 9 years now. Essentially, I've been primarily in a pre-sales role. My background is more on the integration and financial messaging side of things. Moved into payments and into the payments domain, but I am now more responsible for a line of business for APIs around, particularly around ISO 20022 enablement.
Amazing. Well, I mean, that's right at the heart of what we're going to be discussing for the next half an hour or so. So Chris, thanks so much. And also joining me is Elmer from UBS. Elmer, how are you doing here today this afternoon?
Yes, thank you very much. Happy to be here actually in this discussion around looking at these hot topics, hot potatoes we have in the financial industry. I'm working for the UBS Switzerland, since more than 15 years on and off in the area of financial messaging. In the last 3 years in a role as an IT product owner for the message broker UBS uses. And obviously this time of the year is incredibly busy. We are just about 2 weeks in front of the standard release, but this year's standard release is only like a foreplay of things to come that will hit us next year. And probably quite a lot of banks are heavy working already on the standard release 2022, even if the 2021 is not in the dry yet, so to say.
Yeah, well, I think you've hit the nail on the head there, and I'm really excited to kind of hear UBS of Switzerland's point of view when it comes to this topic, because I think we're going to start picking out some of that exciting notions that you guys have and insights around that too. And also joining us is Nahit Ahuja from Valentin Technologies. Nahit, how are you doing here today?
Very well, Doug. Thanks.
Excellent. Well, Nahit, we've already heard about Valentin Technologies from Chris, but could you tell our audience a bit more about your work for Valentin too, please?
Yeah, I look after our platform's line of business. We provide a low-code, no-code platform for financial messaging in the financial messaging space and payment space. My role is to look at the strategic direction for this line of business, along with obviously the profit and loss P&L for this business.
Absolutely amazing. Well, Nahit, I ended with you for the introductions, but I'm going to actually start the conversation with you. And to set the scene, really, I think we need to nail down the definition of what we're going to be discussing when it comes to low-code and no-code approaches. So with that in mind, what does it mean to you? What does it mean for Valentin Technologies, especially when it comes to the financial technology scene?
Yeah, for a lot of those who are hearing Valentin Technologies probably for the first time, we've been sort of doing automation for a good 20 years. We started our business with this. The buzzword today is no code, low code, but if I go down to the sort of nuts and bolts of what low code is, it's basically a way to accelerate the software development life cycle. And today it's branded as low code, no code technology, but in a sense, it's providing the right sort of building blocks to get the solutions out into the market quicker. And the sort of notion is somebody could use that platform and build the solutions quickly without having a deep technical knowledge. And where low code, no code right now is earlier, these platforms required a lot of technical skill to be able to do the job, but it needs to now be at a level where even a citizen developer or a business user can create the solution. So that's where it has changed in the last 20 years. And that's where we are also driving our business unit to.
I think that's really interesting, and especially the kind of the business use cases that can come out of that. I think that's going to be so critical in this topic, because it's such a practical topic, and as Elmer was kind of bringing up earlier, maybe some of the banks aren't looking at it this year, but 2022 you're going to have to start looking at it and start looking at these approaches and how critical they are to really how you bring this system in. So with that in mind then, Elmer, how are organizations actually managing adoption of ISO 20022 in the payments and cash management space? What are you seeing from your perspective, and do you think it's kind of an industry-wide push currently?
Actually, UBS is in a bit, I don't know if it's a unique situation, but a situation maybe not all of the banks are. We analyzed the proposal, especially the CBPR Plus push from SWIFT at the moment that will hit us in 2023, UBS internally, and we were aware that quite a lot of systems would be affected directly by this market change. What we found out in the in-depth analysis is that we had close to 100 IT systems that required an update.
Wow.
And looking at that, we also realized the timeline. The project did not just start now, it started already basically in the beginning of 2020. We realized that the timeline is too short to get all the systems up to the market standard, so we had to come up with a mitigation strategy. So the message broker, I in quotes own within UBS and responsible for on the IT side, is basically the last point in the UBS architecture before actually the data flow spread out to the different subsidiary systems, to the payment engines, to accounting systems, to client reporting systems, back and forth, etc. So we were found to be the point in the data flow to basically build an enabling layer for these different upstream applications to gain the necessary time on the market side. Our advantage in this context is that we don't do this the first time. We have supported other migrations in the past, and especially in the ISO space about 4 years back, the Swiss franc clearing, the SIC, basically already migrated from a legacy form to the ISO 20022 or to an ISO 20022 standard, because also even within ISO 20022 there is multiple variants around in the different markets. So we have some experience in that regard, and we decided to basically build a conversion layer in there that will be capable of translating back and forth between MT to MX messages and vice versa, MX to MT, and basically shield the upstream applications temporarily from the market change to give them the additional time needed to build, implement, and especially also test these new flows and message types. And I was talking about the variances. Obviously, quite a lot of people at the moment look mainly on the CBPR Plus change that is upcoming in 2022, but it's not the only one. Yeah, we are looking at the moment at British pound going live next year already in June for the like-for-like. Same for the Singapore dollar. The Hong Kong dollar clearing chats is basically was originally the first mover in this whole context, already planned in 2019, 2020, had some definition and specifying problems, and is now probably going to hit us in 2023 together with the Fed and chip side. But we also see movement in the Japanese market, we see movement in Australia, we see movement in Taiwan, moving away from legacy form. It's moving away from the old Swift FIN, MT103, MT202, and all the other subsidiary message types to XML-based standards. And that's really a huge change for all of the industry.
Yeah, and all of the industry across various different geographies, all interacting at different times. And it just sounds like such an incredible movement to get initiated. And it's interesting to see that adoption from you guys already. Now, with that in mind then, Chris, if I could also come to you and kind of get your perspective on it, and the same question I posed Elmer, do you agree with, obviously not really agreeing, but do you actually, see similar kind of adoption rates across the world?
Excuse me, absolutely. I mean, we've been talking to customers and prospects in all geographies, really, right the way through from Australia. I've been on early morning calls with banks in Australia to later in the evening calls with banks over in the US and in LATAM, and all manner of banks in between, sort of thing. So it is, as Elmar said, particularly the organizations that have got a highly distributed, maybe multi-country type landscape, The other thing that is a big challenge is, as Elmar said, it's not just about CDPR plus. There are other schemes in different countries, in different regions that have got their own kind of cadence as far as ISO 20022 adoption is concerned. So it's being able to have a solution that I don't think there's any one size fits all kind of capability. So it's trying to standardize and harmonize where you possibly can, but also provide as much flexibility to handle the adaptations for different schemes and for different go live periods and so forth, and also to provide as much capability around simplification, automation, and particularly around things like testing. And again, as Elmar said, one of the key, building the solution is one thing, but one of the key capabilities is the ability to be able to, in a consistent and accelerated way, be able to automate the testing around the different flavors and the different nuances that you've got for ISO 20022 adoption.
Yeah. Now, with that in mind, then, if I come back to you, then, for organisations like yourself, when you were looking at enhancing your existing stack, what were the options to take, and was it really, did you guys see it as a do or die moment, effectively?
Yes, I said in theory, there is, in my opinion, about 3 different approaches to this. Yeah, you could, as a bank or as a financial institution, it's not only limited to banks, it's also big corporate clients, etc., looking at the same questions. You can rip out your existing payment engine and try to replace it with something new, nice, shiny, commercial, off the shelf. But you still will be challenged with integrating that into your accounting systems, into your reconciliation systems, etc. So it's not as easy as it might seem at the first point in time. Then the second option, which is basically exactly the opposite, is you could make sure that all of your existing systems are upgraded 100% on the point in time of the market go live, and basically look down on the rest of the world as it struggles to adopt the standards. But still you need to keep in mind that you have to continue to also support the old standards in parallel, at least for the intermittent phase until 2025, and CBPR Plus has supposed to switched everything to the ISO 20022 standards. And last but not least, you end up with something like the path UBS has chosen. Yeah, UBS will have some applications that will be ISO 20022 ready, especially our super large payment engines we have for our major business hubs. But we support 39 legal entities, and as I said before, 100 affected applications. Not all of them will be ready. So you need something, a man in the middle approach, somebody that is the go in between, that basically takes the market format, whatever comes from the market side, and switches that into something that the application currently still can understand, so that at the end of the day, from a consumer perspective, you look at the end of the day at something like a regression test. At least for an intermediary period of time, it's not the final solution. You purchase time, you take money and you purchase time to get to a solid or a solid and stable architecture within your organization. Because what we see here at the moment in the payment space is, I think, one of the most fundamental changes Swift ever did, or Swift-based flows ever did. It's not only Swift, as I said before. Also quite a lot of other regulators jump onto that wagon at the moment. And I think that's also a difference to changes we saw in the past. Quite a lot of huge changes Swift did in the past were technology driven. Meaning we had some in-depth details, like you had to upgrade from SAG 7.3 to 7.4, whatever. You had to switch certain services to micro gateway. But these are IT topics, and the IT geeks like myself will look into this, but this is not affecting business. However, with ISO 20022, we move from payment format that was at the end of the day defined in the last century. We move to something of a more modern standard, meaning we will see a far structured way payments will be executed in the market. If you just look at creditor or beneficiary information, debitor information, and also at different payment types that are being defined, special purposes, and additional functionality on top of the payments itself. I think so. We've started to move into that direction. Also, another topics as we saw in the last years with UATR, and all this ties together basically in a new landscape we will see in the upcoming 5 years.
Yeah, and with that in mind, then it's a rolling system. In the fact that it started pre-2000, but we're moving into a different way. In the next 5 years, it's going to be pivotal to see that change. But as you brought up at the very beginning of your answer as well, it has to be this kind of measured approach where you do look to kind of look after the legacy systems as well as offering up the new standards. And Nihit, if I could come to you as well from Valentin Technologies side of things and look at that existing stack and to other organizations as well who are kind of looking at the same situation. What options would you kind of recommend or offer, and where does Valentin Technologies sit in that?
Yeah, and I think Elmer covered it very nicely. Organizations have three options. One is obviously to do an open heart surgery, bring in a shiny new payments engine, put it in there, that solves the problem. Second is they build in some sort of business application which takes care of the challenges that exist and leverage that. And third is enhance your existing system and make it more sort of ready for ISO 20022 adoption. So Valentin obviously provides solutions in all these areas, but particularly from the platform side of things or our low-code, no-code solution, what we are providing an accelerated approach to enhance the existing systems which the organization have. And it boils down again to time to market. How do we enable the organizations to adopt the new standards quickly by not replacing or doing an open heart surgery and bringing in a new system, giving them the flexibility to create a tailored experience. As all of us know, ISO 20022 is all about data. And when you're taking data, you want to sort of leverage that data and make it meaningful for your customers. How do you create that tailored experience for your customers? That's where all our low-code, no-code platform and the acceleration capability that comes along with it comes handy. Yeah. And that's again the approach which UBS took, and we really sort of seeing the advantages which UBS is getting out of that approach.
Yeah, and with that in mind, then, Elmer, I really want to kind of understand that approach a bit more. I know you've talked as the industry as a whole, but I'm really interested in the UBS approach, that kind of benefit of the low-code, no-code approach when it came to ISO 22 adoption.
Yeah, let's put it this way. We are not completely new to the business of data conversion. That was basically part of the message broker platform, which at the end of the day, at least in UBS, is also a legacy application. It also has about 20 years on its charter. And about 9 years back, basically, we were looking at opportunities to modernize our architecture. And at that point in time, one of the elements we had in place was a WTX data converter from IBM, which we were not really happy with. We had maintenance issues. We had also some performance issues, not the most severe ones, but we definitely were not in a happy shape at that point in time. So we looked at other solutions, and more or less by accident, we stumbled around the development platform Valentin. That at the end of the day is a graphical developer interface to specify data conversions and a code generator. And what was at that point in time the deciding factor for us was that this code generator was extremely flexible. It could generate output for multiple different platforms, for multiple different runtime environments, Java virtual machines, etc., standalone programs. And also together with technicians from the Valentin technology side, we built a framework to integrate this generated code into our existing applications, slotted it in. Basically, we ripped out the old converter solution, slotted in the converted code, and then started to grow from there. Initially, we were purely mainframe based. Yeah, we are still running on heavy irons, ZOS mainframes, simple due to the scalability. And to our surprise, even with Valentin being, or the Valentin development workbench being you might call it a 4G implementation tool. The sales guys probably hide me for that one. But it was very easy to basically integrate the output from the development tool into our mainframe. And then we've grown from there. We went into the hybrid space. We basically have now solutions as well for decentral platforms. And then came the second big strength from the Volante side. Basically, Volante provides you market libraries for different market standards, be it normal Swift Fin messages, be it Fed and Chips messages, be it the Swiss-specific SECO messages. It helps basically, even if you still need to define your data conversions, but if you already have, like, at least, for example, the market side and only need to define the bank internal data formats and the rules for that helps already quite a lot. Now, when we moved forward, obviously being challenged with the upcoming ISO 20022 migration, we basically also went back to the Volante side for discussions because it was clear time is short and we need something to convert those messages. In this case, it's a Swift MX to a Swift Fin message, but we needed something to do this job back and forth. And we were asking for solutions there also from the Volante side. And what we got basically was on top of the existing market library, and here it gets really to no code, at least in the context of UBS. We got a library from the Volante side that basically did this conversion for us, which we could basically plug into the framework we already had in place for our in-house built conversions. So that's what we are using at the moment. We have in the message broker itself, we have a so-called static data configuration. Would not want to go too much into detail, but we have definitions there basically for each of the data flows from the market to an upstream application and back. And as part of the attributes in that data flow, we can define now more or less on a very easy switch level. Does the upstream application already understand ISO 20 or 22? Yes, no. Does the upstream application sends out a Swift message, an MX, an old Swift Fin message, and does UBS want that Swift Fin message to go out as an MX message to the market? And so as we set these switches, we basically can go now into the migration phase with Swift and move forward, switching all of the different legal entities for market point of view to MX and still enable the upstream applications to work as they do today.
Absolutely incredible, and for such a large-scale transformation, being able to have that flexibility just seems so important. And Chris, can I also ask you the same question? And looking at that approach, and your insights into it as well, and from Volante Technologies side as well, looking on to the approach that was taken by UBS as well.
Sure. So as Elmer said, we've always had this development workbench with what we call format plugins with message packs and message libraries that implement all the syntactical and the semantic validation rules for different sort of schemes, clearing schemes and standards based specifications and so forth. And that's still a thing, and that is essentially what many of our customers use to build their own capabilities, to build their own functionalities, visual modeling to accelerate, out-of-the-box components to accelerate, automatic code generation, documentation generation to accelerate. And then the resulting Java runtime libraries can be deployed into, we're platform and deployment agnostic. Okay, yeah. So there's that aspect of it. But what we wanted to do is we wanted to unlock the potential that was locked up within that visual modeling development platform environment, and to actually make it more generically consumable. And I think that's what Elmer was referring to, where we provided pre-built runtime libraries that perform those translations in accordance with the published specifications in the case of CDPR Plus by Swift, but we want to extend that out to other schemes, other standards as well, so that we make those services available for consumption through standardized API mechanisms like REST, like Java, through an SDK, so that maybe those organizations, those customers that have a different tool or don't want to buy or license our development tool, we can still make those services available and consumable in a more generic and standardized way without having that dependency on our actual sort of development platform.
That's interesting. Yeah, just that kind of being able to be so flexible in that platform is kind of, it's what we're hearing throughout this whole conversation about just the weight of the project, and being able to have that is so important. Now, we've heard about how UBS is going to be changing over the next couple of years, but I'm also interested in what are the investment areas for Valentin Technologies in the coming 12 to 24 months, and how you guys are looking at enhancing your offering, as we're seeing, ISO 20022 adoption is happening very quickly over the next 5 years. What's happening with Valentin Technologies too?
Yeah, I think the way we are focusing on our business is aligned to how our customers, or the challenges which our customers are facing. Like Elmer pointed out, the sheer scale of change is huge. It's not just one market or two markets. So our focus has been, like Chris was outlining, standardizing it the way that you do it, rather than doing it per scheme or per rail that's changing. So standardization, we've already taken care of. What we are looking at is how do we make it easier to use our development platform to do the job. So once you've standardized it, you don't want a lot of effort to be around using the data or sort of embedding the stuff. So that's an area where we're investing in. Now, what we're also looking at is how do we create a stronger ecosystem of partners on our no-code, no-code platform, so that you can get more value-added services. So once you've done the work, you want to create more tailored proposition, or you want to create a unique experience, how do you tap into an ecosystem of partners to do it? Also, as there is a huge quantum of work, you also want people who are familiar with the development platform and who couldn't become a hand. So we're working on creating a stronger partner ecosystem. And third, we want to leverage on artificial intelligence, machine learning, and those type of things, which are big right now. So a lot of work which can be standardized and which can be automated. As I said, automation has been in our DNA. We want to even take it at a different level altogether, where you can apply a lot of these things and make it easier for the job to be done. So that remains our focus, very much aligned to how our customers are going to use our platform and making it easier for our customers to use the platform.
That's absolutely amazing. I love that kind of continued narrative from it being a part of your DNA and just being taken one step further into this new ecosystem. It's so exciting. Now, Elmer, what are the pitfalls organizations need to be aware of when they embark on this journey? Because it's not just one day and you're done. Obviously, you're working on a 25-hour, 7 days a week kind of workload here. What are the pitfalls that you would tell to other organizations looking to embark on this journey?
Yeah, I don't know if everything I will tell can be, in general, be applied to all the other banks, because depending upon the market they operate, they also operate under different legal restrictions, etc. But UBS, I think, being globally exposed, at the end of the day, work under all the different legal restrictions that are basically forced upon us from the different official authorities. So the one challenge here is that as mentioned before, we are turning around the payment business as it has been conducted in the last 20 years. It might be not turned completely on the head, but I dare say it's at least shifted 90% to the side. And as a result of that, quite a lot of companies basically have to look into their operational processes. They have to look into the way their payment applications, their accounting applications, their client reporting applications, their reconciliation applications have been working in the past. And probably, as has been the case with UBS, some of these applications are fairly old. So these applications run fine in the day-to-day life, but it's quite possible that there is code out there that you basically have to put on your Indiana Jones hat and dive into, because the people that originally defined the business rules, how these applications operate, are not around anymore. They might be retired, they might not be in the bank anymore.
Wow.
Day-to-day business is running fine, but nobody knows exactly still why certain decisions have been taken, especially if you look at STP ratios. For organizations as large as UBS, it's absolutely essential that you have a straight through processing rate as high as possible. Otherwise, you can't cope with the volumes. Yeah. UBS deals with something like close to 1.5 million payment transactions a day, never mind the account statements and whatever goes around with it. And if you just think about that 1% of these transactions suddenly won't be processed STP anymore, you're failed. You won't be able to cope that. Never mind how many people you want to hire into your payment operations team. You can't cope with the volume. So the pitfall number one for me is you really need to get a clarity. How does your payment engine today work, and why operate they as they are? That's, I think, point number one. Point number two is what we found, but not only in the context of this project, the data mappers, as we call the job position, that actually work with the Valentin development workbench and actually define the data conversions. That is a special type of an IT person. Yeah, I normally say it's actually a triple mix. What you normally have, you have a part of it is a Java developer, especially due to the way data formats are defined, that is very closely aligned to how the Java language defines data formats. So you have somebody with something like a little bit of a coding skill, and it shouldn't be too bad, to avoid the normal code pitfalls you have, like trying to access undefined variables, stuff like that. And you have quite a lot of undefined variables in market formats with optional fields. Then the second skill set he needs to have is something a little bit like a database administrator, because at the other hand, quite a lot of these data formats at the end of the day need to flow into relational databases, etc. And while defining the data conversions, at least the developer need to have half an eye on how is it going to be processed afterwards in a subsidiary application. This might sound obvious, but for quite a lot of people that start to do this the first time, it's not very simple. Take the specifications, implement whatever is there, and then find out later, okay, it was written A in specification, but at the end of the day, what the requester meant was A+. And that leads actually to the third discipline these type of people need to know and need to do. And this is quite a bit of business analysis tasks. I think I have quite a hybrid selection of people working for the message broker, from standard COBOL developers to database administrators to the people that define my static data. But I think in terms of complexity, the data conversion specialists are probably the most versatile people I have in my team. So that's for me the challenge number two in this context. And then challenge number three, and that's for me might be one that is very specific for Switzerland, but here, at least in Switzerland, the data protection is taken quite seriously. As a result of that, UBS is not allowed to test with production data, at least not anymore. I think if we look 10, 15 years back, it was quite common practice for any IT application in the bank, when they were building a new release, to take a copy from production of the last 3 months, 4 months, and just run it through the test system and see if anything breaks, and then they were done with the regression test. These times are clearly gone. That's not allowed anymore. That's actually enforced, and that's also enforced within the bank by processes to make sure that these type of things don't happen. Yeah. So what you have to do is you have to create all of your test data generically, or you have to create it with a tool. And here I think comes the one of the biggest challenges in the context of ISO 20 or 22. The data variance we suddenly get in these type of transactions is dimensions bigger than what we've seen before. If you look at the minimum definition of a bank-to-bank payment, an old MT202, and if you only populate the mandatory fields, you have maybe 6, 7, or maximum 8 attributes, and then you have a valid transaction. If you look at the corresponding PAX 9, that's far from enough. Yeah, you will have a lot more attributes, correspondingly, a lot more variance, a lot more mutations of your test data. And you need to you keep that in mind and do your necessary testing. Even without looking at any special processes your bank might require or your backend process might require. These are for me the three major challenges at the moment in this context. There is of course other ones, which is the timeline, a lot of things happening in parallel. And at least what UBS is challenged with, even if you are now afterwards fully on ISO 20 or 22, what happens if, for example, such a message crosses the border of different clearing networks? Yeah, we are looking at that at the moment. What happens if, for example, a CHAPS MX message, a British pound payment, comes into UBS and has a final beneficiary in Singapore? Worst case, a final beneficiary connected to the Singapore dollar clearing maps. would mean that such a transaction actually changes heads even in the ISO space 2 or 3 times. It arrives as a CHAPS MX standard, being internally processed as a CBPR plus, and has to go out to the clearing again as a MAPS MX.
Obviously, when you're opening yourself to global risk and all these various different regulations, technologies, and various different clearing houses as well, you realize how monumental this task is. And to be able to then have general data protection regulations on top of that, it just seems like such a myriad of challenges. And Chris, to kind of start wrapping up, I'd like to hear your perspective as well on some of those pitfalls as well. I mean, Elmer, you outlined them so eloquently, so thank you very much. But I'm really interested in that data divergence and kind of Valentin and how you guys have kind of looked at that too.
Yeah, I mean, I think just following on from some of the things that Elmer said, I think one of the potential pitfalls that I've seen is that people believe it's a data transformation challenge.
Right.
And purely a data transformation challenge. But when you consider that, as Elmar's mentioned, the MT202, you've got 8 mandatory data elements and you've got a valid message, but you've got, tens and tens in the corresponding PAX 9 equivalent. That in itself suggests that if you're receiving a PAX 9, for example, and you have to squeeze it into an MT202, where does the truncated data go? So it's not just about transformation from MT to ISO, ISO to MT, it's also a data truncation and data management challenge as well. So you need to have wherewithal and capabilities to be able to store those rich payloads, to be able to glue them back later on in the payment processing flow. For example, when you execute a sanction screening, you want to execute the sanction screening on the full fat ISO message, not on the truncated version, because some of that key information that's going to be screened may have been, omitted from the corresponding MT message, for example. Yeah. Which means then that you're not getting the full effect of the sanction screening. So it's, that's just one example, a very, very high level simplified example of the importance of understanding that it's not just about data transformation, it's also about managing the truncated data through the life cycle of that transformation exercise as well.
I mean, I know it's not just transforming the data, but there's such a wealth of data additional on every single payment. If we, Elmer, you gave a brilliant stat of how many payments are going through your system in any one time, and it's just how you can kind of navigate that system. So guys, I think we've come to time. Thank you so much for your insights. It's really starting to heat up. I'm glad we can have this conversation now and hear some of these success stories, because I think a lot of other organizations, as we've discussed throughout this conversation, are going to start looking at that time limit and starting to think, what are we doing? So guys, thank you so much for your insight. Also to our audience as well, thank you so much for watching. You can catch the rest of the series and much more over at ffnews.com, and of course YouTube, but especially LinkedIn, where you'll see me in the comments. So I just want to say a massive thank you to Nahit, Chris and Elmer. Thank you so much for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I hope to see you again soon.
Thanks, Doug.
Pleasure, Doug, and thank you so much as well.
Thank you.